You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
And it's one of the most fundamental marketing dilemmas that we have. And we want to get people to see us, to experience us, to be able to have an opportunity to have a discussion with us about our coaching and what we have to offer. But what if that's not working? What if the things you have in place for marketing are not sufficient, are not bringing in enough people, or maybe the right people? So then
Or how do you know? Like, what if it's just like you haven't done it long enough? What if you're giving up too early? How do you know if you're giving up too early or if you're doing the wrong things and you should give up that particular direction and go in a different direction, right? How do you know that? And Absolutely. That's a really hard question. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. So the dilemma is, do I persist on my marketing efforts because I just haven't done it long enough to see the progress and to see the results that I need? Or am I actually doing the wrong thing or doing something that's maybe outdated or doesn't work in the area that I'm trying to get clients in? And I actually need to pivot my marketing strategy. So which is it? Do I stick with it and just have patience, or am I going down the wrong path? How do you know? So
that's a hard question. That's such a hard question.
It is absolutely a hard question. We have a simple framework with kind of 3 things that we're going to talk through with you today so that you can have a little bit more confidence when you make your decision about, do I stay or do I go?
Yeah. And actually this framework applies to a lot of decisions. If you want to like take on a particular marketing direction or strategy or product, or sometimes we get into this mode of like, oh, this is the thing I need to do. And then we run with it and we just didn't take the time to figure out, is this actually the thing? And am I going to be committed to it? So that's what this 3-part framework will be about. And it'll help us get into this topic of the marketing dilemma. Like, should I stay or should I go, or fold them or fold them? Or like, it's like strategy and marketing is challenging because also the landscape is constantly changing. So even if you have the answer today, next month, that answer might be shifted. So we're always in this evolving landscape of so many things. So let's talk about the 3 things that, the first thing we should talk about, Sherry, is the 3 things we need to do before we take on a new marketing strategy.
Yeah. All right. So number 1 is
pause. Stop. Take the time out because if you're talking about your strategy and what you're going to do, the easiest thing that we've all, I've done this so many times, sometimes I still do it, which is, oh, I got this great idea, or this thing that sounds like it's going to work, or this program I'm going to buy that has all these promises of how this is like the perfect thing for my strategy, or like, oh, I need to take another course or read another book or whatever. I'll just do this thing. And I won't have stopped to take the time to figure out, like, is this really the thing that I need to focus and commit to? It's like, take that pause, take that stop, and actually pause. Like, is this actually appropriate? Does this make sense? Is this going to achieve the goal? Or am I, as somebody told me yesterday, am I stuck in tunnel vision? I see a thing, I'm desperate, I need to have an answer. Like, we need these answers. And we don't take the time to pause to see, like, hey, that's an answer, but is this a good answer for me? It's like, there might not be a black and white right answer, but is this a good one for me? And you can't know that if you're flitting back and forth between all these things and making a sudden decision and buying something or doing something. It's like, I'm going to commit to this, and you're not really committed. You're actually doing it for a few days and you're like, it's not working. It's like how many times have we done that? Oh my God, I can't even count.
And so also though, with the pause, the kind of the perspective of pausing, be aware on how long you're pausing, because sometimes we can pause things out of fear, out of reasons other than, just an opportunity to step back and get a bigger picture. If you're contemplating a $19 purchase, does that warrant as big and as long of a pause as a $19,000 purchase? Probably not. So part of this is having an awareness how much of an impact and time commitment, financial commitment, opportunity cost, how much of those things are going to be in play with the thing that you're considering doing. And
yeah.
because that absolutely is kind of the foundation for how much time you spend on these three pieces of the framework.
Yeah. So the pause, I would say pause appropriately or pause proportionally, because it depends on the magnitude of the decision you're making. If you've been running ads for 6 months, you're like, I need to stop running ads. I need to do my strategy this way. That's there's more impact to that decision, right? So you need to think about the impact in your life. So I think money, time, impact, right? Like if you think about those three things, like that tells you how long you need to pause for. If you're going to make a big decision on a whim, it's probably worth taking a pause if you haven't thought through how clearly you're sure about this decision, right?
Yeah. So there's another piece to this that I literally just thought about as you were talking, Daniel, because there's some pivots that we have made in the coaching mastery community just over the last couple of weeks. And we've been commenting to ourselves of, wow, like we're making some of these changes and shifts faster than what we've done in the past. And there's a dynamic, I think, that plays into it. And the dynamic is, do we recognize that there is a challenge and we're already looking for a better solution? Or are we taken off guard and like have an epiphany that, oh, well, maybe this isn't working, and then the solution presents itself? So to be a little bit more specific, okay, so it's kind of off topic, but totally relevant still. So I got a phone call from one of my kids' schools, and they're like, hey, we're having some issues. I'm not going to go into them, but I know, yeah, not going to say that in the podcast. And through that conversation, I was like, we're done with public school for this child. Like, this is not okay. Like, there's been a series of things. And the principal's like, well, like I surprised her with the intensity of my statement. And she's like, well, you probably just don't want to make a rash decision. Or she said something like that. And it was in that moment that I'm like, oh, lady, this is not rash. I've been thinking about this and contemplating this for months, or at least a month and a half. And so the difference is that there was one piece of data that I needed to flip the switch of something I'd already been thinking about, versus if I hadn't even considered it and it wasn't even on my mind, and then all of a sudden I'm just acting emotionally. Those are two very different scenarios.
Knee jerk. Yeah. The difference between a knee jerk and a reflected on decision, right?
Yes. So you might make a quick decision on something, but it might be something that you've already been feeling needs to happen, or you've had this sense or this intuition of. So just recognize if something is just coming completely out of the dark and you're making a quick decision, versus if this is like the last piece of the puzzle and you're now making a quick decision.
Oh, that's such a good distinction, Sherry. I love that, because a lot of the time these decisions come out of overwhelmed desperation or a shock, right? And so like in the coaching world, it's like, oh, I need clients, I have no money. So like, oh, there's this thing I could invest in. I can invest $5,000 in this thing that's going to solve the problem for me. Well, will it really solve that problem? And how are you going to solve the problem when you do this thing? Like, are you actually going to be committed? Like, I've done that so many times. I bought very expensive programs and then recognized later that this wasn't right for me. I actually was taken in by the marketing. That's why when I sell coaching, I don't put pressure. I say, people, you can take as long as you want to decide. Just know that my schedule may fill up if that's the case. If you take too long and you still want to come back, then there may not be space, but don't want you to make a rash decision. Because part of what we do in coaching is we make smart decisions, not rash decisions. Sometimes it's actually in that moment, it actually is the right time to make a decision. And so coaching people through that, it's a very interesting balance. It's not always obvious to you in the moment. So that's why the pause is so important. Is this rash, or is this actually reflected? Am I clear? And do I know how I'm going to commit and show up in this thing? And how I'm going to like how committed am I actually going to end up being here? So,
and that's the part that I've noticed for myself is often missing. Is I see an opportunity, I recognize that it could be the solution, and it might be the solution. But what I don't take into account is how much time and energy I have to input into that system in order for it actually to be the solution. And once I get in and realize, I'm like, that's not a fit for my life. I can't really make that happen, or those sorts of things. And even with the coaching mastery community, we've got an amazing membership for coaches who are wanting to, move quickly from zero or wherever they're at to their next level in coaching. But when we have conversations with coaches who are interested in joining, we are very clear, like, how much time do you have to spend on your coaching business right now? Because if it's like 5 hours or less, this is not for you, because you're not going to get the traction you need with that amount of time. This is not the right solution for you. So just being able to explore all of those aspects and how much can you actually invest your time and energy into the thing, whatever that is, the marketing plan, are you going to be able to do that to get the success that it promises or that it's supposed to get?
Yeah, I love that. And so, like, for example, if you're making a decision on coaching mastery community, we do not want it to be a rash decision. We want it to be a great decision for you. That's why we take the time to help you figure that out. And you'll know, like, we have people in our community who didn't buy right away off our marketing masterclass. They actually went and did step 2 of this process. So they paused. They didn't buy it right away, which is good. It's not necessarily good for our bottom line, but we're not about that. We're about helping coaches make good decisions, right? And build their business. And so they did part 2 of this, which is research and due diligence. They literally said, hey, I looked at several other communities and did my research and talked to all these people, talked to people in the community, and I did my due diligence and realized the coaching master community is the best for me. And I was like, thank you for saying that. That is a great, like, sometimes you run a business or you're coaching or whatever you're doing, and you're like, you don't get the feedback from somebody that's like, how do you compare, right? To the options that are out there. Is this a really good option for people? Or maybe we're missing something in the market. But that was just a good reinforcement to me that we're on the right track, because somebody actually took the trouble to making a decision of that magnitude. They took the trouble to do some research. Yeah. And then they ended up choosing us. And that feels like it's not a rash decision. It feels like it's a really well thought out decision. And that person was able to now, having done that research, spend the time in the community, showing up and doing the work. And actually, I think that person within like a few weeks said like, oh, I've already made my entire investment back. And it's probably because he showed up at that level of commitment for himself, right? Like, results are not typical because people don't all show up the same way, right?
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.